A few years back, I found myself alone at home, savoring an unusually quiet night. My parents were out for a dinner date, and my siblings were away at college. I had planned to enjoy a marathon of my favorite TV show and indulge in some guilty pleasure snacks. As I sank into the couch, the silence of the house felt unnervingly loud. The old wooden floorboards creaked and groaned, and the wind outside seemed to carry eerie, haunting melodies. I tried to brush off the unsettling feeling, convincing myself it was just my imagination. However, the night wore on. The strange noises grew more persistent and disturbing. Footsteps echoed outside my room, and I could hear what sounded like someone rummaging through the kitchen. I told myself it was just the house settling, but a nagging sense of unease told me something was wrong. Determined to investigate, I slowly rose from the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. Every creak of the floor felt amplified as I made my way to the kitchen. The room was brightly lit and immaculate, yet a sense of dread clung to the air. That's when I heard it, a soft raspy whisper right in my ear, coming from all directions. I spun around frantically, but found nothing. The whispering grew more insistent, more urgent, telling me, "Get out while you still can." Panic surged through me. I raced to the front door, but my hand fell on a locked handle. Trapped. The whispering became a menacing cacophony, using me to flee. Grabbing a nearby vase for protection, I retreated to the living room, where I braced myself for whatever was coming. The sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps approached from the hallway. They grew louder and more foreboding. I gripped the vase tightly, ready to strike as the figure emerged. It wasn't what I had expected. It was a tall, gaunt woman with long silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. She wore a flowing white gown and moved with an eerie, deliberate grace. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. Instead, she extended a skeletal hand and touched my face. A jolt of electricity surged through me, and suddenly I was overwhelmed by a flood of visions. I saw a once happy family now consumed by tragedy and loss. The woman in the same spot appeared sorrowful and trapped. Realization dawned. This woman was a ghost, bound to our home by years of unresolved sorrow. I knew I had to help her find peace. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took her hand. Together, we wandered through the house, uncovering long-buried secrets and memories. As we reached the front door, I knew it was time to let her go. I opened the door, and she vanished into the night, her eyes finally serene. Standing there, bathed in relief, I understood that this night would forever be etched in my memory. I had faced my deepest fears and helped a tormented soul find solace. A night that would leave me forever grateful. Last summer, after finishing college, I returned to my parents' house for the holidays, looking forward to a peaceful break. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood, their home was surrounded by towering trees that cast long, eerie shadows after dark. It was cozy, but alone at night, it could turn unsettling. Around exactly 3 a.m., I was wide awake, scrolling through my phone in my room. Suddenly, my phone rang and I saw my sister's name on the screen. It struck me as odd. Her room was just down the hall, and she could have easily come over to talk to me. But instead, I answered the call, and as soon as I said hello, no one was there, and the phone call got disconnected. Thinking it might have been an accident, I got out of bed and walked down the hall to her room. As I approached her door, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, sending a jolt of fear through me. I burst into her room to find her sitting up in bed, her face ashen and her eyes wide with terror. She pointed a trembling hand to the corner of the room, her voice quivering as she described the dark, menacing shadow that had been inches from her face. It had felt suffocatingly close, and she was convinced it was real. I tried to reassure her, suggesting it was just a nightmare, but she was adamant about the shadow's reality. The weird part came when I checked my phone. There was a record of the call from her number. Yet, when I looked back at her phone, there was no trace of the call that I had just received. It was as if it had just vanished into thin air. Confused and shaken, we decided to head downstairs. As we sat in the kitchen, I couldn't shake the eerie sensation that something was amiss. The house was eerily quiet, yet every creak and groan of the old structure seemed amplified, making me feel like we were not alone. It was as if the house itself was whispering secrets, despite our attempts to make sense of the night's events. We were left with more questions than answers. The sense of being watched persisted, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something malevolent was lurking just out of sight. The next day, when we told our parents, they dismissed it as a prank call or a bad dream. But I know what we had experienced was too vivid to ignore. After that night, the house became even more unsettling, as doors were slammed shut on their own, and I would hear footsteps in the hallway when no one was there. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or my imagination, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Unable to ignore the growing dread, I decided to investigate a little. Armed with flashlights, I searched every room, closet, and corner, but found nothing unusual. Just as I was about to give up, a chilling whisper brushed my ear, a raspy voice murmuring, "Get out. Just get out while you still can." The voice literally sounded like it just came from the walls themselves, sending an icy chill through me. After realizing that we were in grave danger, I raced back to my room, grabbed my bag, and started packing. My sister saw me, and as she was looking at me, she got extremely terrified, started asking me what is going on, and I immediately told her that we had to leave immediately. She didn't question me as we hurriedly packed our things and fled the house without a backward glance. We literally never returned to that house again, and we never spoke of that night again. But the terror of that summer will remain with me forever, a haunting reminder of a nightmare we couldn't escape. A few years back, I worked as a security guard at City Hall. It was a job marked by its calm predictability until one night when everything changed. Part of my duties included patrolling the building, including the abandoned jail cells in the basement. Though the cells hadn't been used in years, it was my responsibility to check them regularly for any squatters or trespassers. It was only my second solo patrol when things took a sinister turn. I descended into the old prison cells, my flashlight casting long shadows in the narrow, dimly lit corridor. The hallway stretched on for what felt like an eternity, with flickering bulbs hanging from the ceiling barely illuminating the dark, oppressive space. As I moved past the fourth row of cells, the lights abruptly cut out, plunging me into utter darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight and flicked it on, only to see the beam jitter across the walls. I hurried back to the light switch, but just as I reached for it, the lights flickered back on. The unease gnawed at me, but I pressed on, determined to finish my patrol. I quickened my pace, checking each cell with mounting anxiety, but halfway down the hallway, the lights went out again, and this time, I heard the unmistakable sound of two cells slamming shut with a thunderous echo. Panic surged through me. I bolted down the hallway, my flashlight darting frantically across the walls as I sprinted towards the stairs. I took them two at a time, my chest heaving with adrenaline, bursting through the door at the top. I slammed it shut behind me and leaned against it, gasping for breath. I had escaped the darkness, but my pulse was still racing. Back in the main lobby, bustling with people, I tried to steady myself. My hands shook as I made my way to my workstation, my mind still reeling from the terrifying experience. I immediately called my supervisor, inquiring about any reported electrical issues. He assured me that there had been none. I wanted to recount the bizarre events, but my voice faltered. The terror was too fresh, too raw. I spent the next 2 hours at my workstation, my thoughts racing with what could have caused the eerie occurrences. Paranoia set in, making me jump at every little noise. When my shift finally ended, I fled the building as if the shadows themselves were pursuing me. From that night on, I avoided the basement at all costs, even if it meant taking longer routes or risking being late for my rounds. I steered clear of those cursed cells. When I eventually left City Hall for good, I felt a profound sense of relief. Yet, on the rare occasion when the night is particularly still, I can still hear the ghostly sound of those cells slamming shut, a chilling reminder that whatever haunted those dark corridors is still out there, waiting for its next visitor. I used to work the night shift at a rehab facility, a gritty place where the streets were rough and the patients even rougher. Despite the eerie setting of the old building with its creaky floors and the flickering lights, I took pride in my job, knowing it needed to be done. My main responsibility was to monitor the patients and prevent any trouble, but the trouble seemed to find us with alarming regularities. One night, as I was stationed at the desk, I noticed something unsettling on the security monitors. a man standing outside the gate, staring intently at the camera. He was a large figure with a scruffy beard and a menacing glint in his eye. My instinct told me he was trouble, but I tried to dismiss it. He seemed like just another local punk, trying to stir up trouble, yet he didn't move. He stood there, almost as if he was waiting for something or someone. Unable to shake the unease, I decided to use the intercom to see if he needed help. "Hey buddy, you need some assistance?" I said that to him, attempting to sound casual, but he didn't flinch or respond. His gaze remained fixed on the camera, as if hypnotized. Growing more uncomfortable, I called over my coworker Mike for a second opinion. Mike took one look at the monitor and his face turned serious, saying, "This isn't right. Let's check it out again." We walked to the gate, and the man was still there, unblinking. Approaching him, we tried to get his attention, but he didn't react. It was as though he was frozen in place. Despite our efforts to move him, he remained rooted to the spot, staring blankly at the camera. Feeling increasingly uneasy, we decided to leave him alone, hoping he would eventually snap out of it. But he didn't. He continued to stand there for hours, motionless and eerie, as if waiting for something ominous to happen. Then, without warnings, he vanished into thin air. We searched the area frantically, but there was no trace of him, no signs at all that he had ever been there. I was left with a gnawing feeling of dread, a sense that this disappearance was only temporary. The rest of the night dragged on without incident, but the oppressive sense of his presence lingered in the air like a ghostly shadow. Just as I was finishing my shift, I saw him again, standing outside the gate, his gaze locked on the camera. The chilling realization hit me. He wasn't just a fleeting nightmare, he was coming for me. Panic-stricken, I raced inside, locked the door behind me, and called the police. But by the time they arrived, he had vanished once more. Despite their search, there was no signs of him, and he never reappeared. I literally quit my job the very next day, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. To this day, I remember the sight of him staring up at the camera as a stark reminder that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are very real, and they might be watching, waiting, and plotting their next move. I was alone in the office late one night, working on a crucial project. The clock on my computer read 2:04 a.m., and the vast building was eerily silent. Everyone else had gone home, leaving me isolated in the dimly lit office. The lights above me buzzed and flickered, casting unnerving shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. Despite my best efforts to concentrate on my work, my mind kept wandering to the unsettling rumors about the building's past. Some claimed it was haunted, built on an old Indian burial ground. Though I dismissed these stories, the oppressive darkness and the stillness of the night made me question my skepticism. As I typed away, a sudden chill crept down my spine. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but the sensation of being watched persisted. Glancing around, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Empty cubicles and neatly pushed-in chairs. Still, the feeling of dread grew stronger, amplified by my thoughts of horror movies, where the last person in the office always encounters something terrifying. Then, I heard it. A faint creaking sound like the building itself was shifting. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the noise grew louder, evolving into what sounded like footsteps echoing through the vacant office. Anxiety tightened its grip on me. I wanted to flee, but the thought of unfinished work kept me glued to my desk. Without any warnings, the lights flickered and died, plunging the office into pitch darkness. My heart pounded furiously as I struggled to move, my legs feeling like lead, paralyzed by fear. I could only hear my own ragged breathing, and then I saw it. A shadowy figure materializing in the doorway of my cubicle. It was tall, menacing, with glowing eyes that seemed to cut through the darkness like sharp knives. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The figure moved closer, its eyes locked onto me. Desperately, I shut my eyes, hoping it was just a trick of the light. When I dared to open them again, the figure was still there, looming over me like a specter from another realm. A bone-chilling cold swept over me as the apparition reached out, its presence almost suffocating. Just as abruptly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, Melting into the darkness, the lights flickered back on, and the office returned to its quiet, mundane state. I sat there trembling, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Was it real? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? The rumors about the building being haunted seemed to have a grim truth after all, and I had come face to face with the malevolent spirit lurking within its walls. With shaky hands, I packed up my belongings and fled the office, swearing never to return. As I stepped out into the night, the sensation of being watched never left me. I glanced back at the darkened windows, half expecting to see the shadowy figures staring back at me, but there was only the empty, oppressive silence of the night. I kept the haunting experience to myself, fearing others would think I was imagining things. Yet, deep down, I knew the truth. The office was haunted, and I had encountered its terrifying inhabitant. As I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if the malevolent spirit would ever return to haunt me again. In 2013, my dad and I ventured into George Washington National Forest near Deerfield for a hunting trip. It was an icy, rainy ordeal, and we struggled to keep our gear dry. The desolate woods were barren, and after 3 days, we realized we were likely the only people on the east side of Little North Mountain. We hadn't seen a single vehicle or another hunter. One night, my sleep was shattered by a bone-chilling scream that echoed down the mountain from above our camp. It was an unsettling, almost human-like cry that made my skin crawl. My heart raced as I lay wide-eyed in my tent, trying to piece together what it could have been. The second scream came, closer this time. Less than 300 yards down the washed-out trail behind our camp, I whispered to my dad, "Did you hear that?" His terse reply, "Yup," sent a shiver down my spine. I reminded him that the rifles were in the truck, something that would soon become a significant mistake. The next morning, before the sun had even thought about rising, we were already up, joking nervously about Bigfoot while eating our breakfast oatmeal. Out of nowhere, 2 forest rangers in full uniform arrived, parked right next to our campsite, and headed up the trail where we'd heard the screams. They didn't say a word, simply slinging rifles over their shoulders. We guessed they might be investigating the commotion, maybe the silence to rowdy young Sasquatch. Feeling uneasy but undeterred, we decided to hunt lower down the mountain. The mist was thick as we trudged through the underbrush, the squash of our boots merging with the eerie quiet. Every snapped twig made us jump, and I noticed my dad's glances over his shoulder. The oppressive silence made it feel like we were being watched. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. We stopped for lunch in a small clearing, the mist swirling around us like ghostly figures. My dad built a small fire, and we ate canned soap in tense silence. Suddenly a twig snapped behind us, and both of us froze. My dad's hand instinctively reached for his hunting knife, while I could barely whisper, "Do you hear that?" He nodded but didn't offer any comfort. We finished our meal in heavy silence, the uneasy feeling never leaving us as we packed up and headed back into the woods. The howling returned, more haunting than before, piercing the forest with its chilling cry. My dad stopped dead in his tracks, gripping his rifle tightly. "What is that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My dad's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the sound. Whatever was out there, it was unlike anything we had encountered. With each step, the howling grew louder, as if we were walking into the jaws of some unseen predator. I wanted to turn and flee, but curiosity and the need to understand kept us moving forward. We burst into a clearing, and there it was, a creature straight out of a nightmare, standing at least 7 feet tall, with matted fur and glowing eyes. It let out another blood-curdling howl. My dad raised his rifle, his hands trembling, but before he could aim, the creature vanished into the trees, leaving us in the clearing as our hearts were heavily pounding. I barely managed to whisper, saying, "What was that?" My voice lost in the pounding of my heart. My dad's face was pale, and he finally said, "I don't know, but whatever it is, I don't think it's from around here." We stood silently as the howling fit in with each passing moment. With a wordless agreement, we turned and hurried back to camp, the memory of the terrifying encounter seared into our minds. As we packed up and left the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else might be lurking in the shadows of George Washington National Forest, waiting to prey on unsuspecting hunters like us. The terror of that day was unforgettable, a stark reminder of the horrors that might lie hidden in the wild.